previous years, we've had a number of celebrity speakers to celebrate our work and progress. And the celebrities that we've selected this year are our very own scholars and scientists to showcase the people who are really doing the work. And I think it is an appropriate transition out of this challenging period that we've been in, but also a period filled with a lot of opportunity. And I think you'll see how we have tried in our way to turn the challenges that we and many others, really all of us, are facing during these times into opportunities to harness the power of training the mind to address some of the most critical crises that are affecting the world today. When we reflect on the state of the world today, I'm not going to go through data. All of you are here because you're quite convinced of this, but the problems are really monumental. Depression is, according to the World Health Organization, the leading cause of morbidity worldwide. Suicide rates are skyrocketing. Today, there are more than 22 military suicides a day in the United States. We've lost more people in the military to suicide than we've lost in every war combined since World War II. And this is not a depression induction, so I'm going to stop really, but it's simply to underscore that I think most of us would agree that we need a recalibration, and that the very future of our species and also the future of democracy itself depends on the kind of skills that we think can be nurtured through the cultivation of well-being. And that is really why I am here on the planet and why we do the work that we do. It is something that we reflect on every single day. And I feel incredibly blessed to work with such an amazing team, and also to have many of you in the audience who have been friends and supporters and have been critical in enabling the work of our center and our nonprofit, Healthy Minds Innovations, to proceed and to impact so many people in the world today. I have a refrain in my mind that is kind of indelibly inscribed of the Dalai Lama, reminding us that there are 7 billion plus people on the planet, and every one of those people has the capacity to flourish. And we would even go further to say has the right to flourish. And we need to do everything we can to help using the skills and strategies that are available to us to bring this out into the world. And that is the reason for the organizations that we have, for the Center for Healthy Minds, which is an interdisciplinary research center at the university, and Healthy Minds Innovations, which is a 501c3, a nonprofit corporation that's housed in the same facility as our university research center. And this is the only combination of this sort that I know of on the planet today. I wish there were more, because we really need them. But hopefully we can set an example for how this work might be conducted and the impact that it might have. And tonight, you will get a little taste of it from the amazing team that we have.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. We've been busy the past couple of years, so we're very excited to be able to tell you about the things that we've been doing. I am a fervent, if not a bit biased, supporter of this crazy idea that Richie had of putting these two centers together. But I think it really does put us in a position to be able to leverage the strengths from both of these organizations, where we can do the rigorous and systematic science at the Center for Healthy Minds, and then be able to apply that to a global scale with the products and services at Healthy Minds Innovations. Plus, it's a fun job, so highly recommend it. So we're going to talk a lot about the different interventions that we're doing using the products that we've developed together. Why are we starting this talking about measurement? That feels a bit backwards. That's usually what comes at the end of a research talk. But I think it should come first, so I made it be first. But really, measurement should influence all of the decisions of a research project. Not only because at the very end, you need to know, did it work? Did we instill the changes that we were hoping for? Who did it work for? Who didn't it work for? Why didn't it work for those people? It is important to have that final question in mind as we're developing the interventions. These will help you make changes to the product that you're hoping to do, keeping in mind the needs of the population that you're hoping to intervene with. But there's also other questions that you need to keep in mind as you're developing this intervention and thinking about your research project. Measurement can help us tie the dots between what a person is actually experiencing and a scientific framework. Hopefully you all recognize the Healthy Minds framework up there. Do your homework. And that is helpful when we're translating what is actually happening for a person on a human personal level to what, as scientists, we need to study in a systematic way. And then we're spending a lot of time thinking about this middle section here too, which is how and when can we detect when a person is ready to make a change? So we know that we have interventions that work, and we know for whom those interventions can work. How can we target that intervention to the right person at the right time, and how can we predict that? So what are the ways that we can measure that at scale, and be able to deliver the right intervention at the right time in the right way? And all of these are incredibly complex measurement challenges that we are trying to tackle all at once, because we have no life. All right, everybody take a breath. I'm gonna give you a little mini course on measurement here, but we're gonna get through it together, and I'm a fast talker, so it'll be okay. So when we're talking about measurement at scale, we're really focusing on these four main areas of measurement. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. There's lots of other ways to measure well-being and to measure human behavior, but we spend a lot of time thinking about these four. And the first one is self-report, which is just like every survey and questionnaire you've ever done in your life. We ask people to tell us how they're thinking, how they're feeling. It's usually on a scale, and then they get a score. Ta-da, measurement. And that, like Richie was mentioning, that is a type of self-report scale that we have at the World Happiness Report. And then we have experience sampling, which is like self-report, but instead of having all of the questions all at once, you're giving people a lot of questions or a few questions multiple times a day across a variety of days, and then you're able to detect these trends and patterns in their behavior, and that can kind of help us see how they might be going about their daily life and help us get a better glimpse of what their life actually consists of. Then we have behavioral tasks, where we're usually asking people to perform a skill or to do something specific, and then we're able to see how that might correlate with other aspects of well-being. So an example of this would be if we want to measure awareness, we might give them an attention task and see if they're able to keep themselves focused on something that's a little boring. Hopefully not this talk. And then we have passive data. This is a very rich field right now. We're hoping to be able to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on this, because this would allow us to collect information about a person without requiring their direct input. And that can be really easy and straightforward for a user, so it becomes a little bit more streamlined and baked into their everyday lives. This is obviously a very complicated problem. There's no single best measure or best way of doing this. If there were, I wouldn't have a job. But really, what you need to do is to leverage the strengths of all of these measures and then put them together in a multimodal measurement strategy so that we are minimizing the risks and the weaknesses of each of these different measurement strategies. Because they all have their highlights and their strengths, but they have significant weaknesses, and most importantly, they have a lot of biases that are specific to these different types of measures. So self-report, it's quick and it's easy and it's fast and everybody knows how to do it, but it can have some pretty significant biases. People can lie, they can be too embarrassed to tell you something, they might not know and they'll just sort of cheat. And there's no way of really capturing that in a survey. I can fix that with a behavioral task. You can't really lie your way out of that, but it can be pretty hard for a user, and they might not want to do it, and it might make a research project really difficult to complete. So I can fix that with passive data, which is difficult to bias in the same way that you would have bias in a self-report. And it's very easy for a user because they're not even noticing it. But the scientific literature hasn't quite validated it all the way yet. So I can't just trust that in and of itself. So really, if we're designing a rigorous and impactful intervention and research study, we want to be able to combine these in different ways so that when we're answering the question, did it matter? Did it make a change? We can trust that answer because we know that we're not falling victim to some of these pitfalls. So the bad news is this is really hard to do well. The good news is there's lots of very talented researchers that are working on these problems, possibly here. But there's these researchers all over the country and all over the world. And the better news is that one of the initiatives at the Center for Healthy Minds is bringing some of those researchers together so that they can work together on solving these problems, which Christy will tell you a bit about.
Yeah, so this multimodal measurement approach that Raquel just described is central to a network grant we just recently received funding for to advance research on emotional well-being. We are one of 6 NIH-funded networks, which you can see in this figure here. And our specific network, which is magnified and circled, is focused on the plasticity of well-being, which refers to the learning we can engage in and the skills we can develop to care for our minds. So in collaboration with these 5 other networks, we are working on constructing toolboxes and repositories of existing measures of emotional well-being. Our goal in doing this is to make it really easy for researchers to find and use these measures. And as an example, at this QR code here, you will find a repository of self-report measures that we have constructed on emotional well-being across the lifespan. Another major goal of our network is to develop novel measures, including biological and mobile technology measures that we can use in our intervention research and that people can also do from home, so they don't have to come into the lab. And you're going to hear a little bit about a few of those measures from Simon later. And this is where our partnership with HMI is really exciting. So I'm going to hand it back to Raquel to tell you a little bit more about those measures.
Yeah, so over the past couple of years, we have really expanded our toolbox for measures that can be done using mobile devices. So all of these are screenshots from measures we developed over the past couple of years that can all be deployed on a mobile device. Some of these can be deployed on anything that has access to a browser because it's a web app. So the Teddy app up there is something that you'll hear from Simon's study a little bit later. It's already being deployed in a study with depressed individuals, and it captures video and audio data. So it's our first foray into some more passive measurement. And then these other 5 here are gamified tasks, so essentially mini games that we've done where we've taken a behavioral task that is established and well validated in the field, and then we've turned them into mini games so that they're not as onerous and difficult for users to do. Specifically because for these games we were focusing on teenagers. So we wanted to facilitate the research with teenagers so that it's not so hard to keep them in a study and so hard to collect the data from them, and to have this be able to be done at scale. So even if it's not a part of a research study, we could still have them do these measures and collect data on them wherever they might be. And this really helps us to be able to do the type of research that we want to do, to be able to drive the kind of impact that we want to have, but not be confined to our geographical location. So even though all of us here are in the Midwest, we can do nationwide studies, and we can make sure that we're reaching a diverse audience and diverse participant panels so that we can really learn what is working for whom. And while this is all very important and great to have good science, really what I'm most proud of for these games, for these measures rather, is that we co-developed them with the teenagers that we were hoping to deploy them with. So at all the stages of development, we were engaging with a diverse and rotating panel of teens and getting their feedback and making changes based on that feedback so that the end product worked for us as researchers, so we know that we're going to get good science from these, but it works from the participants and from the teenagers' point of view as well. So they're getting information from this that is helpful to them. It's helping them feel like they're more in control of their lives. It's helping them realize how they want to embody their values more. The second from the right there is actually being used a lot by teens as a journaling activity and just helping them process their thoughts, which was not something I was expecting, but I'll take it. And it's great, and we're getting really interesting feedback from it. So it's a way that we know that we're building science that is going to not only work for us as scientists, but it's going to work for the people that we're hoping will be better from this science. And we are seeing that there is a greater need and a greater call for this type of research, which we usually call community engaged research, which Christy will tell you some more about.
Yeah, so Raquel just highlighted how incorporating teens' experience can increase the validity and the impact of research for a population that is experiencing significant declines in mental health. It's also the case that some communities are suffering much more than others due to systemic and structural injustice. For example, people from racial and ethnic minority populations, as well as people with lower socioeconomic status, and those who live in rural communities are less likely to have access to mental health care, and they're more likely to receive lower quality mental health care. And so the basic idea behind community engaged research is that the people who, sorry, I'm losing my thought. The basic idea behind community engaged research is that the people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. So for our research to be impactful, those people must have a voice and power in the research process. And so in community engaged research, academic researchers work alongside community members in partnership. So through partnerships with local community organizations, schools, faith communities, and other local groups, together we can address the priorities of underserved and underrepresented communities. By making decisions jointly, we can build trust between academic researchers and community members. Lived experiences are valued and inform the research questions and research hypotheses. And through this process, this partnership, we can minimize risk to the community and maximize actionable outcomes that will actually benefit the community. So I want to close with a specific example of a community engaged project that has been funded as the inaugural Center for Healthy Minds Directors Award. And this project is part of a new research initiative to improve mental health outcomes for justice-involved individuals, with a specific focus on reentry, so the transition from prison back into the community. Dan Groupie, who's here somewhere, there he is leading this work in partnership with the Nehemiah Center and with other local groups here in Madison. And for this particular measurement project, what Dan and I observed is that while there is no shortage of measures of well-being and mental health, what we observed is that there are very few measures that were developed for and with justice-involved individuals as an outcome of reentry programs. And this work aligns with a recent report from the National Academies on measuring success after prison. So following their conclusions about the limits of recidivism, they emphasized how important it is to measure well-being and to do that in partnership with those with lived experiences of incarceration and reentry. So to highlight kind of how important this partnership is, I just want to read you a quote from this report from Director of HIV Prevention and Education with the Alaskan AIDS Assistance Program. And Venus says, "Who should you get the information from? Us, people with lived experience. That's something I've seen that has changed over the years too. When I was first released 10 years ago, we weren't talking about our stories out loud. We weren't talking about the criminal legal system the way we are today. We have to be at the table. We aren't just redemption stories. We're leaders who have something to say and something to offer, and we will be the ones with the solutions to make that change." So as we humbly enter into these community partnerships, we anticipate that many new research questions and research initiatives will arise. And we're so incredibly grateful for the support of so many of you who are here today that often make it possible for us to pursue those projects. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about cultivating collective well-being. So in most of the conversations I hear about well-being, it's usually about the individual. How is the individual doing? How is their personal well-being doing? What we are focused on in my area of HMI is really reaching out with the tools that we have built to groups of people that have something in common. And this in particular case is groups that work together. They're employees for organizations of all types. It turns out we don't know as much about that as I think we do about individual well-being, and so there's a lot of work to be done there. We don't know what kinds of interventions are going to be most effective. We don't know how to measure that stuff as well as we do individual well-being. So it's a fascinating area, and as a fan of science in my role, I'm extremely curious to go on the journey with the team here. So first of all, why is working with groups of people and organizations interesting and important? Well, the first reason is that it's curiosity. We don't know what works, and we would love to know, because it's a very effective way to have impact in the world. If we can interact with a group of people and collectively raise the well-being of a group, we can have impact more quickly and more effectively than going one by one throughout the population of those 7 billion people, perhaps. And so there's a lot that we would like to be able to do there, but we need to learn about it. And so one of the reasons we're engaging is to actually just to figure it out. The graph here is just one of the many ways in which we can see those characteristics of change in a population taking place as we offer programs and measure their effectiveness over time. The second reason is absolutely because HMI and CHM are here to have impact at scale. And so when we're working with a group, this is a nonprofit group in Arizona, for example, we can actually see the impact of the programs we're offering and the benefits that are starting to bubble up inside those organizations. So in this case, we worked with a team for a month, and in the measures that we collected during that period of time, we're able to see improvements in things like sense of community amongst that group of people working together, and significant reductions in stress and burnout measures, and just overall improvements in well-being. And that is something that we couldn't say 2 years ago before the last time we saw you. We hadn't launched our programs. We didn't know if what we were going to do was going to have a positive impact in the world. And now we have mounting evidence to show that it actually doesn't take very much to raise the well-being of a group of people who are in need of those kinds of services and who have been provided them by their organization. And the third reason why we're doing this is very pragmatic. HMI partly exists to help support the work that's going on in this room and in this university. And so we are here to try to build a business around this, to generate revenue that can then be fed back into our collective organizations here to support the research, the science, and ultimately to make this a long-term sustainable operation. And we are making success there. As you can see, the little chart on the right there, we would love to have those numbers be even bigger than they are, but we are moving in the right direction. Over the last couple of years, we've gone from having no customers to quite a few, and there are more and more knocking on our door all the time. I mean, as you can imagine, the need has grown tremendously, and we get increasingly larger organizations and more interesting contacts knocking on our door looking for what we have to offer. So how does Healthy Minds at Work, we call this program that we offer Healthy Minds at Work, how does it work? Well, we have a few different components that we have introduced and created with the help of our design team, our software team, our scientists. We have a mobile application, but what we've done in this version of the workplace product is we've modified it. We've added a little button. You can't really tell what it is down there, a little suitcase that contains practices of value to employees in the workplace. And that content is only available if you're a subscriber with your company or your organization. So we've added new content. Around that, we have built a much more comprehensive well-being survey that allows employers and employees both to get a deeper dive into their own well-being. So we measure things like work-life balance inside of groups of employees, burnout, and other measures that are really important. And the individual themselves gets that kind of feedback. So they are learning about their own well-being as they're going through this, but so does the employer. And so the employer gets insight into how their team is doing and how that might be changing over time. We also offer live training. So Stephanie, as you know, and others too, but Stephanie provides just amazing classes and learning labs that are open to all of the organizations and members that subscribe to our workplace offering. And we get rave reviews from those individuals. Our enrollment every time we offer one of these goes up every time, and I know that people give tremendous feedback on those experiences. And we believe that that's the key component of this. We're trying to figure out the constellation of different approaches here, and a purely digital solution is not necessarily as good as one that is augmented by a talented teacher like Stephanie. And we have customer support. This is Michelle. I don't think, is Michelle here? No. Michelle is customer support. She's the face of Healthy Minds at Work for our customers out there in the world. So when something comes up, when they have a question, Michelle will be the one to respond. And that's part of the offering that we've created. We're actually supporting these customers with real-life interactions. So this is Healthy Minds at Work. This is how it works. Who are we working with? We're working with a constellation of organizations, and there's many more that actually we could add to this list. It's got pretty crowded. But we work with research organizations, universities. We have a program at the University of Virginia where all of the staff and faculty, it's about 25,000 people in total, are using Healthy Minds program at their work, and they're actually studying it at the same time. So we're doing research alongside providing an employee benefit. And the research that comes out of that is going to be fascinating to see how that is working. We work with manufacturing companies. Just is a manufacturer of egg protein products. It's a factory, essentially, making food. We work with a lot of groups that I would put in the category of service organizations. So these are organizations where the team at that particular organization is in service of the people that they are working for. So education, for example, will be a good example of that, or healthcare, where the impact of one employee has a ripple effect on all the people that they are helping themselves. And so that acts as kind of an amplifier for the well-being. And we know from the research that's been done by these guys down here that when a teacher has a higher level of well-being, the students' performance and well-being is lifted also. I believe that that's absolutely the same thing true here when we're working with, for example, we have our program in the hands of all the childcare workers in Pennsylvania. About 60,000 child workers have access to our program. So you can imagine each of those childcare workers is looking after a dozen families. The impact and the ripple effect is huge. So what have we learned so far? We've learned a lot, and there's a lot more to be learned. We are making a difference. So far, we've reached we've had people engaged in our program, actively engaged, about 17,000 participants over the last couple of years across 72 different organizations, and that was 0 in early 2020. And across those groups of people, we've seen an overall reduction in stress of 13% and a 27% reduction in burnout measures across those populations. Really, and that's with a 1 month engagement. With not a great deal of time. And so you can see the potential. First of all, the problem is big, but the potential for helping is also big. And so we are seeing that manifested in the data that we're collecting with the program that we're offering. However, not easy. When we're out there on the market, so to say, with our products, we get calls from every kind of organization you can imagine. And we help all of them. We're working with a nonprofit in Scotland, and I said, okay, great, how big's your company? How big's your organization? We have 3 people. Great. Well, we want to help you too, and so we are. We are giving them access to our service. We're actually giving it away for free because it just makes sense. But we work a huge cross section of organizations, and there's a lot of work that we have to do on our side to really streamline some of our operations, and that's one of the reasons that we need those resources in our organization to really optimize how we get our tools into the hands of people, no matter whether they're working for a tiny organization or a huge one. So there's work to be done there, and right now we're doing a lot of that work manually. We'll eventually get to the point where that is easier to deliver to the marketplace. And I think over the last couple of years, increasingly we are starting to see that we have a niche in this marketplace. We have competitors, of course. There are other companies out there offering services for the workplace. But 2 or 3 things really come to the forefront in the conversations that I have with these potential customers. One is the science. The science is a huge differentiator for what we're doing. And immediately for a skeptical organization or a company that maybe is full of engineers, for example, who want to see the facts before they are willing to trust it, they see the science and they are immediately reassured that there's something good here that they can trust. The other thing that we see in these conversations is that we're a nonprofit. And so they actually inherently know that our motivations are in the right place. And so that speaks very, very loudly to school systems and healthcare organizations who are also nonprofit organizations for the most part and also exist to help other people. And we instantly have that in common. And so our niche, I think, is starting to emerge, if we have one. It's in these groups where we can serve people who are serving other people themselves. I think it's the right place for us to be, and also it has that potential to magnify what we're doing multiple times to give ourselves really the chance of having the most impact in the world. So we're only 2 years in. We've started from nothing, and we're moving towards a bright future. There's lots of interest, but lots more to learn. But we are quite optimistic about where this is heading, and hopefully it will end up becoming something that is a powerful component of what we have to offer. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Hirschberg. I'm a scientist at the Center for Healthy Minds, and I'm going to briefly cover some of the research we've been doing on the impacts of meditation interventions in educational contexts. I love this quote, and I've started to start talks to educators or about educational research with it, because I think it speaks to something fundamental in the meditation interventions that we're studying. And the insight really that's expressed here is that we often can't change what's happening around us. We can't change external events or our external environment, but we always have something to do with how we're responding to it. And that sense of agency, I think, is really important to recognize and appreciate, because it means we always have some capacity to, if we can't immediately influence what's happening outside, to influence our experience of it. And in stressful and difficult circumstances, this becomes really important. Schools are highly stressful, and classrooms are really complex and really complicated. And to be resourced to properly or to really best deal with the types of things that arise in these sorts of situations, we need to both know and have some skills to work with how we're responding to the moment. And if you don't know Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor who gleaned this insight while in Auschwitz, actually. So, this sort of statement comes with quite a bit of cachet from someone who lived through what he lived through. So, as I said, educational, it's been known for some time that teaching in particular is highly stressful. These data were collected in the summer of 2020, the sort of first part of the pandemic, in 662 Wisconsin school system employees. And what you can see is really like alarming levels of distress. So nearly 80% of the sample had elevated anxiety and depression symptoms, and more than 50% of the sample was symptomatic at a level that would often be considered clinically significant. So there's a lot of need out there to support the people who are working in our schools and school systems, and I mean, that's an important reason to do it in and of itself. But we know that that really learning is a social process, and kids learn primarily through the interactions that they have with their teachers and the adults that they interact with in educational contexts. And when teachers or other adults are highly stressed or burnt out or anxious or depressed, it tends to degrade the quality of interactions that they have with their students. And as a consequence, students actually tend to learn less. So there's even data showing that teachers who are higher in depressive symptoms have students with lower achievement levels. So it's partly a question about supporting the adults, because that's important to do, but it also has this systemic impact on everybody who's operating in that system. And so that's what we've done in a couple of studies that I'll talk about. One study at the teacher or educator level, and then the last thing I'll cover is at the student level. And our research has really been oriented around a sort of logic model of change that starts with the idea that there are some basic domains of well-being, awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. Raquel and Christy talked a little bit about this, and that we think we can train these skills in these domains through declarative learning about well-being, married to experiential or skills-based training in the actual practices of these skills. So that's where we start. We develop an intervention that we think does this. Recently, many of the studies have used the Healthy Minds Program app, and we predict that when people go through these sorts of trainings, they will actually strengthen skills that are associated with well-being. So these are examples of skills in these awareness, connection, insight, and purpose domains. And then by strengthening these skills, we think that we'll see these positive mental health outcomes. So people will reduce things like anxiety and depression, while they'll increase positive mental health, things like flourishing or well-being. And we also think that we'll likely see some distal benefits of this, so even beyond the individual. At the individual level, in the context of, say, a school, we might see that teachers become more effective, and we might actually be able to measure that by showing that teachers with improved well-being have students, for example, who have better learning outcomes. And we might also show increased persistence in the profession, so people are more likely to stay and less likely to leave. And then at the systems level, we might see improvements in things like school climate, right? So if the adults who are working in a school system have higher well-being, you might see sort of a collective impact that Andrew was talking about in the form of school climate. And of course, school climate is not unrelated to the well-being of the individuals in that school. It's also one of the major predictors of student achievement. So there's likely feedback loops, again, back to really the primary purpose of educational systems, which is to promote high-quality student outcomes. So this is the basic model we're operating under. And in that study with the Wisconsin school system employees, we randomly assigned them to 4 weeks of the Healthy Minds Program app, or to a waitlist control condition where they would get the app at the end of the study. And this is our measure of psychological distress, which is an aggregate of stress, anxiety, and depression. And what you can see is at the beginning of the study at time 0, that's those data that I talked about before, the groups are totally the same, right? There's no difference in the levels of distress. But even 1 week into the Healthy Minds Program intervention, you start to see a really pretty rapid decline in distress symptoms in the intervention group. By the end of the intervention at 4 weeks, you see a really robust reduction in distress amongst intervention participants, and it largely persists 3 months later. So again, Andrew spoke to this. This is just a 4-week intervention, totally delivered through an app on a smartphone, and on average, people practice just 5 minutes a day. So this is actually really important, right? Because when you're going into sectors where people are already really busy, really stressed, quite burnt out, it's hard to ask them to engage in really intensive interventions. And if you do, most of them will just say, no, I don't have the time. I'm too stressed. Stressing me out just thinking about having to do that. So the fact that we found data like these is really encouraging because it means you can have a big impact with a little bit of time in a way that is potentially very accessible. So we also asked we tried to sort of examine the second part of our model, or really the first part, which is if people go through this intervention, we believe they will strengthen these skills, and we believe it's the strengthening of those skills that then will predict lower distress over the long term. So we measured these skills throughout the intervention period, and like our measure of awareness was mindful action, and we found that yes, indeed, people who were in the Healthy Minds program did significantly increase in mindful action, and then we also found that that increase in mindful action did predict these long-term reductions in psychological distress, consistent with the model, and we measured also connection skills and insight skills and purpose skills, and in every case we found the same thing. People in the intervention, there we go. People in the intervention increased in these skills, and the increases in these skills actually predicted over the long term improved mental health. So that's exciting because it says that our model, has something to say about what's actually going on. And then I'm going to shift gears here to an intervention we did with undergraduate students. This is actually a credit-bearing course being taught at the university, at Penn State University, at University of Virginia, and elsewhere. Some of the instructors of the course are in the room. And these data were collected before and after this course, so at the beginning and the end of their first semester of college, and we took students in the class and compared them to students who were very similar on a whole bunch of dimensions. And what you can see is on a whole bunch of areas, attention skills, social emotional skills, flourishing, mental health, we saw that enrolling in this course, completing this course, led to a number of benefits in these undergraduate students, including reduced depression, which is very encouraging for the reasons that Richie talked about. And the other thing that I want to highlight is this effect here on shared humanity. This is a measure that looks at your ability to kind of relate essentially to people who you don't necessarily feel are like you. And again, in the political climate that we're in and the sort of cultural dynamics, this is really promising to me because it says we can train people to feel more related, more connected to people who otherwise they might not feel so connected to. So just briefly, future work. The top two are studies that are about to begin using the Healthy Minds program or similar trainings. We're going to do a larger scale study with employees in the Jefferson County Public School District in Louisville, Kentucky. And then a really large study with Mexican healthcare providers. Again, same basic model, seeing if we can promote these skills and then improve mental health as a result. And in both cases, we'll also look at a variety of distal outcomes. And these are future studies that we hope to do that are sort of next stage of the education work. So also bringing the intervention down to the student level and working with, for example, adolescents suffering from depression. So thank you. It was a very nice speaking.
But it's wonderful to be here with you all. It's really, I was reflecting on the wholesomeness of this gathering during some of the conversations earlier, and the generosity that brings us here, and really the sheer aspiration to make a difference in the world is such a beautiful thing. So I hope you're feeling that. I'm sure you're feeling that at this point in the evening. You've been hearing a lot about this. We're in the midst of a mental health epidemic. As Richie mentioned, depression has long been a leading cause of disability, and this has only increased during COVID-19. And the good news is that there are effective treatments that we've developed, medications, psychotherapies that we know are helpful for things like depression and anxiety, but many who might benefit don't receive those treatments. We think of this as a treatment gap, and it has an enormous effect on our public health and on the lives of individuals, communities, and society as a whole. And we'll do a little audience participation this part of the night. How many mental health professionals do you think would need to be trained in order to provide evidence-based treatments to all of the people who would need it in the US, for example? Just in the US. Any guesses? What's that? A lot. It is a lot. That's the right answer. It's 4 million, over 4 million mental health. It's a lot. And there's no time soon where that's going to happen, right? So we have the conviction that I think probably many of you, at least some of you, maybe many of you share, that digital technology might be part of the solution and might be part of the way that we can get evidence-based strategies into people's palms and into people's lives and into our communities. So we've been doing a lot of work focused on the Healthy Minds program app, which I think is a beautiful tool that has grown really from so many people in this room, from funders to innovators to all of the hands that have lifted up this product. And it's really amazing to be a scientist to have a tool like this that you can really believe in, that you're trying to bring out into the world and understand scientifically. So we've been conducting a lot of trials with this study. And in all of the 4 randomized trials that I'll just share a tiny taste of tonight, we've enrolled over 1,400 people, which from a scientific standpoint is really cool. We used to do studies with 20 people. Now we're doing studies with hundreds of people. So it's an exciting time, and the technology really makes that possible. So we've been conducting kind of 2 different flavors of study. Efficacy study is a fancy word for effectiveness. So this is studies that are focused on whether the Healthy Minds program app is helpful for people. And both of these studies have used a waitlist control, and I'll share just a touch. You heard about one of them from Matt earlier. And then we're also conducting a second kind of bucket of studies that are focused on making the app more effective by optimizing it. And in particular, we're looking at a key component of the app, which is meditation practice. So I'll share a little bit about those 2. We're looking at meditation dosage in those studies. So for the efficacy studies, we've conducted 2 randomized trials, both compared to a wait list. And the first of those just looked at an 8-week period. And what we found, encouragingly, was that those who received the app showed decreases in distress, improvements in various measures of well-being that we were training in the app, that were intentionally cultivated in the app. And then as Matt shared, we were really excited to see, we didn't know how this was going to go. Some of these digital tools aren't so effective, but we were really excited to see that the benefits were sustained 3 months later and showed in the science world what we call a small to moderate effect size, which we were really excited about. It was a Cohen's d of 0.3. You can tell your family when you get home. And then we have on the other side of the house these dosage studies that are looking at, in the first study, whether it's more effective to meditate more minutes per day. So this study looked at what we think of as a low dose, 5 minutes and 15 minutes. Maybe that's a moderate dose. And a second study looked at whether it's more effective to meditate once versus twice a day, keeping the total amount of minutes constant. So if you're meditating 20 minutes, is it better to do it in 2 sessions or 1 session? And I'm reminded, I think, Richie, you were talking about that we didn't have answers to these questions at, I think, the last The World We Make, that years ago. So we're starting to get answers to these questions. We're still analyzing these data. So far, it doesn't appear that this has a strong effect, which is really interesting. And in a way, could be good news. If meditating 5 minutes once a day is effective, that's a scalable solution. That's something that we might be able to get people to do at scale. So that's not necessarily bad news. So I wanted to talk, those are kind of completed or partially completed studies. This is a study that we're really just at the beginning of, and we've been enrolling participants just since June in this study. And this is a study we're calling the Behavior, Biology, and Wellbeing Study, or the BeWell study. And it's focused on seeing if the Healthy Minds program app can be effective in participants with clinical depression. So we're actually doing clinical interviews. We're providing, we don't share this with the participants, but we are diagnosing some participants with major depressive disorder or other depressive disorders, actual clinical conditions. And we're also in the study looking at how our intervention might affect, as Raquel was talking about earlier, some of these objective measures of depression and objective measures of well-being. So different aspects of behavior and different aspects of biology. So there's another audience, I wasn't planning this, but another audience participation on the next slide. So we've been looking at different videos and different types of videos that consistently elicit a positive response from people. And Raquel's team did an amazing job looking at the wide variety of videos that have millions of views on YouTube to see which were the ones that most commonly elicited a smile. And do you all have any guesses as to what videos are most consistently smile-inducing? Cats? I heard some cats. And babies. Good job. It was babies. Yes. So it's been really fun. We're starting to get this video data in from the Teddy app that was mentioned earlier, and they're really infectious. If you want a positive affect induction when you get home, watch a laughing baby. They're really quite amazing. And that's one of the things that we know about depression, is that rewarding experiences aren't as rewarding often when people are experiencing depression. So we'll be testing that and looking to see whether training in the Healthy Minds program changes the degree to which people are finding these experiences rewarding through their face, through their smiling. And the other objective measure I wanted to mention briefly is gut microbiome. So this is in collaboration with Joe Handelsman's group at the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery, and we're learning more and more about the way that the gut and the brain are connected. The gut-brain axis, I'm sure you all have heard about this. So participants are mailing us small samples of stool, and we'll be looking at the composition of the bacteria that's living in their gut. And they're doing it. They're willing to do it, which has been, a process. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is just some, and Christy talked about this earlier, but the commitment at the center and HMI that's been really inspiring to me, and we're seeing in the app this commitment to making tools that are more inclusive and are promoting equity at a societal level. So one of the ways that that's manifested is through the inclusion of highly experienced and racially diverse guides who come from various walks of life, who bring a different perspective and a different amount of accessibility to these tools. So we're just now starting to look at data related to who's listening to what in the app and whether those patterns of engagement relate to different outcomes ultimately. But it's really inspiring. It's hard to get culturally responsive interventions into the world, and I think we really have a good potential to do that with the team here. So thank you.